On the 18th green, with millions watching, the unthinkable happened. The air was so thick with tension, it felt like the entire weight of 2 continents hung in the silence. Cameras zoomed in, hearts pounded in unison, and time seemed to slow as one player, the pressure of history etched on his face, stood over the ball. The gallery was frozen. Packed shoulder to shoulder, their cheers choked back into an anxious hush. Every whisper died, every cough held in the chest, because this was not just another putt. This was destiny. 30 feet of grass, one chance to shift the balance of the Ryder Cup, one chance to either send millions into euphoria or plunge them into heartbreak. His hands trembled. Just barely, but enough that the world saw it. The commentators, who usually filled the air with endless chatter, suddenly found themselves mute, unwilling to curse the moment with words. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The stroke came, smooth yet uncertain, the white ball rolling over the manicured green like a prayer whispered into eternity. It flirted with the edge of the hole, the crowd inhaled as one, then an audible gasp erupted. It lipped the cup, cruelly spinning out, defying belief. A collective roar of disbelief thundered through the course, part anguish, part ecstasy, depending on the flag in your hand. The player's face collapsed in an instant, the weight of failure pressing down like a storm. His opponent clenched a fist, not in gloating triumph, but in shocked relief. This was the kind of moment that rewrote legacies. For one man, it was the miss that would haunt him. For another, it was the lifeline that would fuel a legend. The broadcasters finally broke their silence, their voices trembling as they searched for words. "Unbelievable," one gasped. "We may never see a moment like this again," another whispered. But the truth was, everyone knew they would, because Ryder Cup destiny always finds a way to break hearts and bend history. And as the crowd's roar echoed into the night, one truth lingered over the green: this was not the end. What led to that moment started years ago, and in just hours the entire tournament would change forever. The Ryder Cup has never been just another golf tournament. It has always been something larger, part war, part theater, part test of collective soul. Born in the 1920s as a friendly contest between Britain and America, it has since evolved into one of the fiercest rivalries in all of sport. Team USA against Team Europe. 2 continents colliding every 2 years, trading not just shots, but symbols of pride and identity. Over the decades, it has become a tapestry of unforgettable drama. There was the miracle at Medina in 2012 when Europe staged an impossible comeback against all odds. There was Brookline in 1999, where American jubilation spilled over in controversy, sparking bitter memories that lingered for years. Each Ryder Cup has carried its own wounds, its own heroes, its own villains. Every fan who watches carries those memories like inherited scars. This was never simply about golf, it was about belonging. About who you stood with when the pressure hit its peak. By 2025, the stakes had only grown heavier. For Team USA, the Ryder Cup meant redemption. Years of inconsistency, bitter collapses, and whispers of disunity had clouded their legacy. They carried not just their clubs, but the burden of proving that American grit could still rise above pressure on the grandest stage. For Team Europe, it was about unity in diversity, a patchwork of nations bound together by pride, tradition, and a shared hunger to remind the world that Europe was more than the sum of its parts. And then there was the stage itself, Bethpage Black in New York, a course as ruthless as it was legendary. Known for swallowing egos and humbling giants, its jagged bunkers and unforgiving rough turned every shot into a trial. It was more than a battlefield. It was a character in the drama, a relentless adversary that cared nothing for reputations. Players whispered about its brutality in practice rounds. Commentators called it a monster. Fans, however, called it destiny. The political undertones weren't lost on anyone. With the world watching, American players marched in under the gaze of a partisan crowd, desperate for dominance on home soil. European players, facing chants that sometimes blurred into hostility, knew they carried the pride of a continent that had defied expectations for decades. Every putt, every drive, every collapse carried the weight of national narratives: power versus resilience, swagger versus unity, legacy versus future. Media hype only fueled the fire. Headlines framed it as a clash of empires. Social feeds churned with speculation, memes, and promises of unforgettable drama. Broadcasters replayed old collapses, old triumphs, as if to remind the players that history was watching too. Fans across both continents marked their calendars, booked flights, and painted faces, ready to live and die with every swing. The overarching question was clear: which side would bend and which side would rise? Would American firepower and home soil advantage finally silence the doubts? Or would European resilience, forged from years of battling together, prove once again that unity can outlast arrogance? No one knew the answer then. They only knew that history had set the board, that the game was no longer about swings and scores. It was about spirit. And as the sun rose over Bethpage Black on the opening day, both sides walked onto the course believing they were ready to write their story. Little did they know, one match would shatter all predictions. Every great drama needs its antagonist, and at the Ryder Cup, that role is never simply assigned. It is earned through swagger, dominance, and the arrogance of believing destiny bends to your will. In 2025, the spotlight of suspicion and hostility fell squarely on Team USA. They were the hosts, the powerhouse, the team with more firepower than anyone else on paper. And they walked into Bethpage Black with the posture of giants, daring Europe to challenge them in their own backyard. The captain, a man who had lived through Ryder Cup heartbreaks yet never quite shaken the perception of being combustible under pressure, framed his squad as warriors ready to reclaim American honor. His speeches dripped with bravado, promising not only victory but domination. "This is our house," he told them, "and we won't let Europe steal another moment from us." The crowd ate it up. The American press, desperate for triumph, turned every press conference into a coronation before the first tee shot had even been struck. But it wasn't just the words. It was the aura. The star players, their swings thunderous, their reputations gilded by major championships, walked the fairways with a kind of sharp-edged confidence that bordered on contempt. They had been through the gauntlet of Augusta, the Open Championship, the cauldrons of Sunday afternoons where careers are defined. To them, the Ryder Cup was supposed to be their proving ground, their chance to flex their might not just as individuals, but as the face of American golf. Their arsenal was intimidating. Bombers off the tee who could cut Bethpage Black down to size with sheer length. Iron players whose precision could turn impossible pins into birdie chances. Pairings built on experience, chemistry, and ruthless efficiency. And then there was their secret weapon, the psychological warfare of a home crowd whipped into frenzy, roaring at every American birdie and jeering at every European misstep. For the U.S., this wasn't just sport, it was theater, and they had scripted themselves as the inevitable victors. Yet the shadows of past controversies clung to them like smoke. Memories of Brookline's wild celebrations, when American players stormed the green before Europe had even finished, resurfaced in every European headline. Whispers of arrogance, of entitlement, of forgetting the true spirit of the game echoed through European media. Some American players only fed that narrative, leaning into trash talk, declaring that Bethpage would be too hostile for Europe to survive. Confidence blurred into overconfidence, and overconfidence always leaves cracks. The captain himself stumbled under the media spotlight. A poorly worded comment about Europe's weaker bench ignited fury overseas, turning his press conference into bulletin board material for every European player. His attempt at swagger came off as disrespect, a reminder that sometimes words can backfire louder than missed putts. And in the locker room, though rarely acknowledged, there lingered the ghosts of American collapses past: Medina, Paris, Whistling Straits. Moments when talent had not been enough, when chemistry crumbled under pressure. Some players carried scars, too. The star who had never quite delivered in team play, always brilliant alone but erratic when forced to bond with a partner. The young phenom, hailed as the next Tiger, who had already shown flashes of temper when crowds turned. Even the veterans, experienced as they were, bore the knowledge that age and expectation could be as heavy as any golf bag. For all their firepower, there was fragility. The reliance on crowd energy meant that silence, those tense, stunned silences when putts lipped out or drives sailed wide, could become their undoing. Their captain's bravado, meant to inspire, had instead raised the stakes to unbearable heights, and their strategy, built on length and aggression, left little room for subtlety or patience on a course that demanded both. Still, on the surface, they looked invincible. They were the villains not because they lacked greatness, but because they reveled in it. They embraced the role, casting themselves as the unstoppable force, daring Europe to play the immovable object. To the crowd, they were gladiators. To their opponents, they were juggernauts. To themselves, they were already champions. But hidden beneath that polished armor was something far more fragile than anyone dared admit. Pressure has a way of bending steel until it snaps, of turning giants into mortals. And in Bethpage's brutal theater, where every mistake echoes louder than every triumph, the Americans' confidence carried within it a dangerous seed, because the truth was undeniable. Their confidence hid a deeper vulnerability. One misstep would expose it all. Every Ryder Cup forges its own heroes, men who arrive not merely to play golf, but to shoulder the burden of something larger than themselves. In 2025, the European team came to Bethpage Black not as favorites, not as swaggering conquerors, but as underdogs who knew the world had already written them off. And yet, within their ranks stood stories of resilience and redemption so powerful that they carried the quiet strength to shake the foundations of American certainty. At the heart of this journey was their captain, a veteran of Ryder Cups past, scarred by both triumph and heartbreak. He was no stranger to American hostility. Years earlier, he had walked these fairways under a hail of jeers, steadied himself under the chants of USA, USA, and somehow delivered. But as captain, his role was different. He was now the architect, the strategist, the soul who had to unite a dozen men from a dozen different backgrounds into one voice. Critics doubted him. Some even sneered that his leadership was outdated, that his fire had cooled. But those who knew him saw the quiet steel in his eyes. He had lived this rivalry. He had felt its weight. And he knew that if Europe could trust in unity, they could outlast American arrogance. Then there was the veteran player, a man in the twilight of his career, chasing not just points, but immortality. His story was carved in pain as much as triumph. The injury that nearly ended his career, the years of rebuilding his swing, the whispers that he was finished. Yet here he was, carrying the respect of fans who adored him not only for his victories, but for his resilience. He had nothing left to prove, and yet everything still to play for. For him, the Ryder Cup was legacy. Each swing in 2025 carried the possibility of being his last in this sacred contest. His presence alone reminded teammates that greatness was not measured only by trophies, but by the scars you bear on the way to them. And then there was the rookie, the wide-eyed newcomer who had never felt the furnace of Ryder Cup pressure until now. He arrived with a fearless grin, his bag heavy with potential rather than history. To him, every gallery cheer was fuel, every hostile chant a challenge. He did not carry the baggage of past collapses. He carried only belief, the kind of reckless, unshakable belief that sometimes changes everything. The veterans smiled at his enthusiasm, some shaking their heads, others whispering, "We need that fire." He was the spark, the player with nothing to lose and everything to gain. Their preparation had been meticulous. Early mornings on the range, long walks through Bethpage's punishing rough, endless putting drills under the scrutiny of cameras. They trained not just their swings, but their minds. They visualized the pressure, rehearsed the silences, imagined the roar of American crowds trying to rattle them. The captain spoke not of scoreboards, but of identity. "We are not 12 men," he reminded them. "We are one team. When one of us stumbles, another steps up. That's who we are. That's Europe." Still, doubts crept in. The veteran questioned whether his body would hold under the grind of pressure. The rookie wondered if his nerves might betray him when a million eyes stared down at a single shot. The captain lay awake at night, the burden of history pressing heavy, asking himself if he had made the right pairings, if his faith in unity could withstand the American tidal wave. Each of them carried an inner voice that whispered of failure, of cracks that could widen at the worst possible time. Yet what separated them from their opponents was not the absence of fear, but the acceptance of it. The Americans arrived cloaked in bravado, flaunting their firepower. The Europeans arrived cloaked in humility, embracing their fragility. They did not pretend the course would spare them. They did not pretend the crowd would welcome them. They acknowledged the storm and resolved to walk through it together. In the quiet moments, away from the cameras, bonds formed. The rookie sought advice from the veteran, who shared stories of heartbreak and resilience. The captain listened to every man, hearing not just their strategies but their fears. A brotherhood was forged, not in arrogance but in honesty. And that bond became their greatest weapon, something no statistic could measure, something no headline could capture. As they prepared to step into the cauldron, their hearts beat with a different rhythm than their opponents. They carried not the certainty of victory, but the determination to fight for every shot, every hole, every moment. For them, victory was not guaranteed. It had to be earned through grit, through patience, through unity. They walked toward the first tee with the weight of underdogs and the fire of believers. The crowd roared against them, the odds stacked tall like a wall. And yet in their silence, in their calm, in the way their eyes did not flinch, you could feel it. They believed this was their moment. But would pressure crack their resolve? The sun rose over Bethpage Black with a golden haze, but beneath that calm morning sky, tension pulsed like a live wire. Day one of the Ryder Cup had arrived, and the air itself seemed heavier, as though history knew it was about to be written. Fans crowded the ropes hours before the first tee shot, draped in flags, faces painted, chants echoing across the fairways. This was no polite golf gallery. It was a stadium atmosphere stretched over rolling hills, and every cheer, every jeer, carried the weight of nations. The opening match set the tone. The Americans sent out their power pairing, a duo built on raw driving distance and bravado. They strutted to the tee, greeted by roars of approval, confident that intimidation alone would carve the first point. But the Europeans answered with strategy, a steady veteran and the fearless rookie. From the first swing, it was clear this was no one-sided affair. The rookie striped his drive down the middle, a statement that silenced the crowd, if only for a heartbeat. Hole after hole, momentum swung. The Americans unleashed towering drives, yet the Europeans countered with precision. Fairways hit, putts holed, eyes unflinching. By the turn, the underdogs were up, and the murmurs in the crowd hinted at unease. Elsewhere, matches told their own stories. A pairing of European stalwarts stumbled early, misjudging Bethpage's brutal greens, handing quick holes to the Americans. The home crowd seized the energy, chanting louder, waving flags like a wall of red, white, and blue. Momentum seemed to tilt, and commentators whispered that Europe's composure might already be cracking. But just when the tide seemed unstoppable, the Europeans clawed back. A long birdie putt dropped on the 15th, silencing the gallery in one piercing moment. What looked like a runaway became a grind. By the afternoon, tension was everywhere. The Americans doubled down on aggression, sending their stars to the front lines. It worked at first. One European rookie missed a short par putt on the 4th, his face tightening, the crowd exploding with laughter and chants. The cameras caught the captain's stoic expression, but inside he knew moments like this could fracture confidence. And yet the very next hole, the same rookie stiffed an iron to 3 feet and buried the putt, fist clenched, eyes ablaze. Redemption in a single swing. Blunders came on both sides. A seasoned American missed a 3-footer that could have flipped his match, and gasps ripped through the gallery like a lightning strike. His partner tried to mask the tension with a grin, but the body language betrayed frustration. Meanwhile, a European veteran misread a crucial putt, head shaking in disbelief, handing life back to the hosts. It was golf at its most brutal, fortunes rising and falling with every shot, every blade of grass. The crowd's energy became a weapon. "USA! USA!" thundered across the property, each chant echoing pressure onto European shoulders. But the visitors responded with calm, steady handshakes, hushed encouragements, smiles that masked the storm within. For every American roar, there was a European answer, a clutch par save, a nerveless birdie, a look exchanged that said, "We will not break." By late afternoon, the matches were balanced on a knife's edge. Scoreboards flickered with red and blue, leads exchanged like punches in a heavyweight fight. Commentators leaned into microphones, their voices tinged with disbelief at the drama unfolding. The Americans had their moments of dominance, but Europe refused to vanish. Every time the home side surged, the visitors found a way to drag them back to earth. As shadows stretched long over Bethpage, the day closed with tension so thick it could be felt in the silence between chants. Players trudged up the final holes, faces etched with fatigue and resolve. The scoreboard glowed in the gathering darkness, a stalemate of sorts, though not without scars. Both sides had landed blows. Both sides had faltered. And yet, neither had seized control. As darkness fell on day one, the scoreboard begged one question: who would blink first? The second day dawned sharper, cooler, the kind of morning where the air feels electric before anything has even begun. By now, the storylines were set. The Americans, cast as the powerhouse, bristled with confidence, while Europe, the so-called underdogs, stood their ground with quiet resolve. But what unfolded across Bethpage Black was not simply golf. It was a battle of will, a drama etched in grass and silence, punctuated by roars that shook the sky. The first turning point came early. A marquee American pairing, two bombers who had been touted as invincible, were 3 up with 6 holes to play. The crowd chanted their names, already celebrating as though the point was secured. But Europe refused surrender. On the par 3 13th, the rookie, his jaw tight with determination, pulled a 7-iron, swung smooth, and sent the ball soaring. It landed soft, rolled toward the pin, and stopped inside 4 feet. He tapped in the birdie, eyes steely, no smile. 1 hole clawed back. On the 14th, his partner drained a 20-foot birdie putt, fist-pumping as the silence of the crowd betrayed a shift. 3 up became just 1. Commentators murmured that the unbeatable Americans looked rattled. By the 18th, the match was all square, a half-point stolen from the jaws of victory. Momentum began to stir. Elsewhere, a European veteran faced a moment that could define him. On the par 5 15th, his drive found deep rough, his second barely advanced, and suddenly he was staring at a must-make 20-footer for par. He crouched low, the weight of decades on his shoulders. "He knows," the commentator whispered. "This putt is the Ryder Cup." The gallery hushed. He drew back the blade, smooth, certain, and the ball rolled, catching the edge, falling in. The eruption was volcanic. The veteran's roar cut through the New York night like defiance itself. That single putt did more than win a hole. It lit a fire in his team. Meanwhile, the Americans felt cracks forming. Their captain's voice, once booming with bravado, now rose with sharp edges, urgency replacing control. Cameras caught heated exchanges between players, one blaming a misread, another staring off, eyes clouded with doubt. It was subtle, but the body language told the truth. Pressure had begun to gnaw. The defining singles match was where the drama sharpened into legend. A European rookie against the American star, the very man heralded as golf's future, who had crushed opponents all year. On the 16th, the American stood over a 10-foot birdie putt to seize control. His breathing slowed, the crowd at fever pitch, chants pounding through the silence. He stroked it firm and missed. The gasp was thunderous, disbelief written across faces. The rookie stepped up next, 12 feet for par, a putt to tie the hole. "He has no business making this," one analyst muttered. But he rolled it dead center, unfazed, fist clenched at his side. The balance of power teetered. On the 17th, the turning point arrived. The American, needing to reclaim momentum, launched his tee shot but overcooked it, deep into rough, the gallery scattering. The rookie stepped up, shoulders squared, and flushed his drive down the middle, calm as stone. His second shot, a towering iron, landed pin-high, spinning back to 6 feet. As he walked up the fairway, the crowd hurled chants, insults, noise meant to rattle him. He smiled, not mocking, but resolute. He holed the birdie. The tide had turned. The American star cracked. On the 18th tee, visibly rattled, his drive hooked into thick grass, his jaw tight with frustration. Commentators fell silent, sensing collapse. The rookie found the fairway again, steady as a heartbeat. The gallery held its breath as the final shots played out. The American hacked out, short of the green. The rookie, with everything on the line, took his wedge, crisp and clean, floating the ball to within 3 feet. The roar this time was split, half disbelief, half awe. But across the course, other battles raged. Another American duo, once dominant, squandered a 3-hole lead with a series of short putt misses. The crowd gasped at each one, their cheers turning into nervous murmurs. Europe fed off the tension. A clutch chip in here. A nerveless birdie there. Suddenly, red on the scoreboard bled into blue. Momentum, that invisible tide, had shifted. By late afternoon, the Ryder Cup was transformed. What had seemed a coronation for the Americans became a dogfight. Commentators struggled to capture the chaos. "This is the Ryder Cup at its rawest," one said, his voice cracking. Social media exploded, clips of the rookie's fist pump spreading like wildfire, fans on both sides claiming destiny. The Americans, once so loud, now muttered among themselves. Their captain barked orders, but the swagger was gone. Europe, in contrast, walked taller, their eyes locked, united in silence that spoke louder than words. Every clutch putt, every recovery shot fed the narrative. They were not here to survive, they were here to win, and then came the final hole of the day. A match tied, tension unbearable, one putt separating glory from despair. The American stood over the ball. The green ringed with thousands, millions more watching worldwide. His hands trembled, his breath uneven. He stroked the putt, and for a moment the world held its breath. And then came the final putt. Everything hinged on one stroke. The final putt dropped, and with it, the Ryder Cup of 2025 etched itself into legend. Europe had done it, against the odds, against the chance, against the so-called inevitability of American dominance. The scoreboard told the tale. Europe victorious, their margin narrow yet undeniable. On the 18th green, players collapsed into one another's arms, flags unfurled, tears streaming down cheeks that moments earlier had been masks of stone. The crowd was split in two. The stunned silence of the home faithful mingled with the euphoric roar of traveling fans who had crossed oceans to witness history. Commentators scrambled for words. This is one of the greatest comebacks the Ryder Cup has ever seen, one whispered, almost reverent. The broadcast replayed the pivotal moments, the rookie's fearless putt, the veteran's roar after sinking the 20-footer, the American star's missed opportunity. Each clip became a symbol, looping instantly across screens worldwide. Social media ignited like wildfire. Hashtags trended globally. Ciao Bethpage miracle, ciao Cup shock, ciao Ryder reborn. Memes flooded timelines. Images of American players staring in disbelief, spliced with captions of stunned emojis, contrasted with Europeans grinning under a cascade of confetti. In press tents, emotions ran raw. The European captain's voice cracked as he spoke. "They said we couldn't do it here, not at Bethpage, not against this team. But belief is stronger than noise. Heart is stronger than pressure." His words echoed far beyond the room, embraced by fans who saw in them something greater than sport, a validation of resilience, of identity, of daring to defy expectation. For the Americans, the scene was starkly different. Their captain, shoulders slumped, admitted, "We had it in our grasp. We let it slip." Reporters pressed about strategy, about pairings that faltered, about misreads on the greens that haunted the team. What had been framed as a coronation now felt like an inquest. A few players stared at the floor, avoiding questions, while others spoke with clipped frustration. The swagger that had defined them at the start was gone, replaced by the hollow sting of defeat. The reputational shifts were immediate. The rookie who sank clutch putts was elevated overnight from promising talent to folk hero, his name trending across continents. Endorsement deals and sponsorships lined up within hours, companies eager to tie their brand to his poise under pressure. The veteran who had long carried the scars of near misses found redemption. his career redefined not by what he had failed to win, but by the fire he had rekindled. On the American side, reputations fractured. The star who missed the crucial putt faced brutal headlines. Golden Boy turns to dust when pressure broke a champion. His legacy, once untouchable, now carried a shadow. Beyond the players, the ripple effects spread. National pride surged across Europe. Front pages hailed the victory as not just sporting, but cultural, proof of unity and resilience on a hostile stage. In the U.S., soul-searching began. Commentators on late-night shows debated whether arrogance had undermined preparation, whether the noise of Bethpage had turned into a weight rather than a weapon. The defeat became a metaphor, dissected not just in sports sections but in op-eds, think pieces, even political commentary. The sponsors felt it too. European victors saw their profiles skyrocket, their brands basking in borrowed glory. For some American stars, contracts suddenly looked shakier, the shine of marketability dimmed by images of faltered composure. The Ryder Cup, always bigger than golf, once again proved itself a cultural touchstone, where legacies are rewritten in real time. Yet even as champagne sprayed and fans sang deep into the night, the story was far from over. Because what the world had witnessed was not just a result, it was the planting of a seed. Rivalries had been deepened, scars etched, belief systems shattered and rebuilt. Every Ryder Cup rewrites history, but some set the stage for futures larger than the moment itself. The 2025 Ryder Cup at Bethpage was one of those. For Europe, it was triumph against the impossible. For America, it was humiliation on home soil. For the sport, it was proof that golf could still ignite passion, still break through into the mainstream with the force of a cultural earthquake. And yet, as the lights dimmed and the fans drifted into the New York night, one truth remained clear. The legacy of 2025 was just beginning to unfold. When the echoes of cheers and groans finally faded from Bethpage, what remained was not just a scoreline, it was a story written in resilience and humility, a testament to character over ego. For Europe, the triumph was not about silencing doubters for a week, but about proving what has always defined their Ryder Cup spirit: unity. Their heroes showed that when the noise swells, when the moment threatens to consume you, it is not swagger that carries you through. It is belief in one another. The rookie who drained clutch putts did not do it alone. He did it knowing a veteran walked beside him, steadying his nerves, whispering encouragement. The veteran who found redemption was not seeking personal glory. He was seeking to repay years of faith, to give back to teammates who never let him slip into obscurity. Together they became larger than themselves. For the Americans, the defeat stung, but even in loss, there was a lesson that cut deeper than any headline. Talent, power, reputation, none of it guarantees victory when pressure mounts. What faltered was not skill but cohesion, not ability but balance. Their collapse under the brightest lights revealed the truth. In team golf, greatness is measured not just by individual brilliance, but by the willingness to trust, to listen, to shoulder the weight together. Humility, not bravado, is what steadies the hands when history is watching. The contrast between the two sides carved the moral heart of 2025. One team leaned on unity and emerged stronger. The other leaned on pride and cracked under its weight. Yet even here, redemption waits. For those Americans who stumbled, the Ryder Cup does not close their story. It challenges them to rebuild with humility, to rediscover joy in the grind, to face future cups, not with the weight of entitlement, but with the hunger of renewal. In sport, failure is never the end. It is a teacher, relentless and unforgiving, but ultimately generous to those who learn. This was the legacy of Bethpage, that the Ryder Cup is not simply about who hits farther, who holds more putts, or who carries the loudest chant. It is about the human spirit in its rawest form, about courage in the face of doubt, composure in the face of chaos, dignity in the face of defeat. The 2025 Cup reminded the world that adversity does not break us. It reveals us. And in revealing, it asks us to choose. Do we shrink or do we rise? Across Europe, fans spoke not only of birdies and scoreboards, but of pride in what it meant to stand together. Across America, the loss sparked hard questions, but also a call to something deeper, a return to humility, a rediscovery of the values that make sport resonate beyond the course. Sponsors, commentators, and fans alike agreed the Cup had delivered more than spectacle. It had delivered a mirror. And so, as the confetti was swept and the cameras turned off, the meaning of 2025 lingered. The players would move on, careers would continue, trophies would gather dust, but the truths unearthed at Bethpage would endure. Teamwork over ego, unity over arrogance, dignity over noise. That is why the Ryder Cup remains timeless. It is not a tournament. It is a parable. Every drive, every putt, every roar carries something larger than golf itself. In 2025, that parable was clear. Victory belongs not to the loudest nor the strongest, but to those who rise together when the world holds its breath. And in that rising, we all find a piece of ourselves, because the legacy of Bethpage is not confined to one team or one week. It is a reminder to us all. Resilience conquers adversity. Unity transcends division, and in the end, the human spirit is the greatest champion of all. On the 18th green, with millions watching, the unthinkable did happen. But now, in hindsight, that moment wasn't just a putt. It was the culmination of every triumph, every stumble, every heartbeat that defined the Ryder Cup of 2025. What seemed like destiny hanging on the edge of the cup became something larger. A reminder that sport reflects life itself. Bethpage gave us more than drama. It gave us lessons about resilience, about humility, about the power of unity when the odds are stacked against you. It showed us that victory is never guaranteed by reputation, that defeat can reveal as much about character as triumph, and that every swing under pressure is a window into the human spirit. But here's the question. Which moment defined this Ryder Cup for you? Was it the rookie's fearless putt under the crushing silence of thousands? Was it the veteran's roar, echoing redemption across decades? Or was it the stunned silence of a star crumbling beneath the weight of expectation? Your answer may say as much about you as it does about the cup itself. We want to hear your stories. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with those who still believe sport carries meaning beyond the scoreboard. And join this growing community where every game becomes a story, every match a battle of identity, every moment a chance to see ourselves reflected. Because this is only the beginning. More stories, more drama, more echoes of truth are still to come. And remember, whether in golf or in life, the real victors are those who fight through the storm.